wameingia NASA, bibi ameingia NASA, watoto wameingia NASA, mama yake yuko NASA, majirani wote wako NASA. Kwa hivyo tunaenda wapi? Kanan.
Welcome back. This is Sunday edition. Thank you for staying with us this Sunday morning. It is 31 days to the October 26 repeat presidential election. We're talking about what happens after the petition. We've had a lot to say, or my panelists have had a lot to say about the just concluded petition, the verdict, and the detailed judgments by the 6 judges. Let's now talk about, very quickly, wind up on this issue by talking about what happens next. And before we talk about Kenya's and IBC's preparedness for the repeat polls, Dismas, where does this leave this country? Some people, some pundits here in the country and across the continent have lauded the Supreme Court, saying this was one of the best judicial decisions made on this continent. We have seen Jubilee's reaction to the verdict, saying the Supreme Court made a mistake. Indeed, it was judicial coup. That is what President Uhuru Kenyatta has called it. But moving forward, where does this leave this country in terms of elections and how elections are determined in this country?
Ben, the train has already left the station. Now, what needs to happen is for Kenyans to appreciate that that Supreme Court decision, it's not a win for NASA, it's not a win for Jubilee, it's not a loss for NASA, it's not a loss for Jubilee. It's a win for the entire nation called Kenya. Now that the Supreme Court has pronounced itself, we can have this conversation till the cows come home, but nothing is going to change. What needs to happen is for IBC to accept liability, for them to do a special audit and address us on the illegalities and irregularities.
Sure.
When they do the special audit, then they invite all the stakeholders and say these are the challenges we faced. And these are our proposals moving forward.
Right.
And as much as you may want to say that IBC is an independent organization, there's still public participation. Because every Kenyan needs to have confidence that IBC is going to deliver a free and fair election. When they do that, they meet with the stakeholders. Then now they do the critical success factors. They do the critical path analysis.
Yes.
What must we do now so that we achieve a free and fair election? In as much as, again, we say they are independent, they must address the concerns of Jubilee. For instance, yesterday, Mr. Raphael Tuju indicated that there's a gentleman by the name Walubengo. That's an allegation that he may have accessed the servers 54 times. Let that issue be sorted out. NASA has made an allegation that Chirchir accessed the IBC servers a number of times. Let that be addressed. So that by the time we are going for an election, the systems are so clear that when IBC pronounces somebody winner, we know for a fact this is a winner. If they said somebody is a loser,
yes,
we know this is a loser. That's what we need to do. And then number 2, people must stop referring to this decision as a judicial coup. Because evidence was presented before the judges. The judges formed a view based on their experience, based on the evidence on the table. So they formed a view. It cannot be a judicial coup. And when you say that the Supreme Court overturned the will of Kenyans, nobody actually knows the will of Kenyans because the numbers were not even presented. The judges said that these numbers are as good as the process. So we don't know for a fact who won that election. We don't know for a fact who lost that election because the numbers are now up in the sky. Let's clean that system. And it's important to take into active consideration what Justice Maraga said, that if you repeat these same mistakes, you come back to us, we'll not hesitate to give these same verdicts.
Okay.
And then number 3, it's important for us Kenyans to apply a pressure on the political class because it seems now the political class, both Jubilee and NASA, are not interested in an election. Now it's up for us now to apply pressure, starting with the mark right here. We tell them that we need this election, we need to sort it out so that we go on with our lives. Right now everything is hanging in the balance. Business has come to a standstill,
all right, and
people are just waiting.
It's important to state that those claims against the Walubengo and Davis Chirchir are simply allegations. Hesbon, yes. What happens with the Supreme Court vis-a-vis its collision with the Jubilee government?
You know, politicians will always politic. And just like Dismas rightly say, this is not a judicial coup. And even the people who are saying that it's a judicial coup know that it's not a judicial coup. There is a sense in which when you're disappointed in something and you're a politician, you do want as much as possible to have a reassuring effect on your support base, basically the electorate. And I think that is what Jubilee is doing. They're actually reassuring their people that we actually won. So whatever is happening is a process that is, close to what we would call a coup that has taken our win. But I think having said that, we should not blanketly say that the Supreme Court denied Kenyans their will. It is not about the will of 15 million Kenyans. And whatever the Supreme Court underscored was the rights of 40 million plus Kenyans going forward. That any other Kenyan who believes in the rule of law in an election that will be held periodically now has a reason to believe in an election because the process, and the outcome will be very credible, and no one is going to dispute that. But it is also important to understand that from the sentiments that you're getting from the political class, to even respect the decision of the Supreme Court. Because if the Supreme Court did not find respondent number 3 culpable for anything, did not say that the petitioner won, whatever the Supreme Court did was to throw them back to the field. So much so that if you won fairly, you should not have a problem. Just go back to the people, ask for those votes. The process will now be a lot more fair, a lot more credible, and whoever wins, I think the credibility that will be attached to the winner is going to be a lot more pronounced if the system is fair. And I think that is credit to the Supreme Court. But I think we need to look at it in terms of the processes, the procedures that are elaborated before the election. And you realize that the reason why we have these hotly contested presidential elections is that our constitution as it is right now has a winner takes it all and a loser is thrown in the bush. Right. You lose an election, you have at least 35% of Kenyans behind you, but then, the winner refers to you in very derogatory terms. Ule mtu wa kitendawili, akukwa mustuni. And I think we need to address that, and it is good we have a mheshimiwa here who happens to be coming next to my constituency. So if I meet Honorable Junior, I also talk to him about this, that there is a sense in which we need, because our politics is not as sanitized as we want it, we need to ensure that if there's a presidential candidate, and this is my opinion, which I will share with my legislator, if a presidential candidate has at least 35% of the vote, we should think of making this presidential candidate, if he's a loser, a senator at large, and the deputy presidential candidate, an MP at large. This is not something new. I think in 1928, an American president, loser called Al Smith, actually proposed this. It didn't happen in America, but you'd understand, because their democracy is mature. Right. But I think there's a fear in losing an election when you have massive following. You have 45% of the vote behind you, and then you're going to be out for 5 years.
Ben, you cannot let Owila go with
after the petitions.
Exactly, we don't you can't let Owila go.
And I said it is my opinion. It is not matter.
I think after the petitions, for me, I think the ruling, if you ask me today, I think our judiciary has totally come of age. What we need to do, if there are any gaps, perceived or real, identified by either side of the divide, they need to put them to table so that we can only, even if we have to amend the laws, is only to strengthen what is there. Sometimes it is easier to smile and, shout your voice, shout at the top of your voice when you're on the side whereby you're actually being favored, especially for the guys who are on the Jubilee side. Today, they might want to amend the rules of the game. Tomorrow, they'll be on the other side. These very rules will apply to them. So I think really we need to celebrate our judiciary for having come of age, that it is possible. For me, the most important thing, that it is possible for anyone, not only a presidential candidate, but any petitioner to move to court, irrespective of where you're coming from, irrespective of your stature in society. And if they find reasonable evidence for them to disqualify an election of this magnitude, they will.
All right.
How it impacts on the other elections is also something to talk about. Like I had alluded to earlier, this is the first time we are seeing close to 300 petitions. And we are hoping that the lower courts are actually going to take cue from what they're going to be bold enough
Yes.
to really restore, the sanctity of the vote. That if, the people who benefited of the 54% or whatever it is, actually are taken back to the voters, and rightful winners actually win. So we really need to support the judiciary.
Would you go back to the vote yourself?
Any
You're
day.
part of the August 8th.
Any day.
All right. Mutinda have the last word on this. We need to move away from this and focus on the battle ahead. From where you see
the most important thing for me
Yes.
is that everybody has respected the judgment of the Supreme Court.
Right.
How we feel is, again, the rights of Kenyans. Some are very happy, some are disappointed. This issue of a judicial coup is a genuine feeling among Jubilee supporters, and I do not see anything wrong with it. We need to understand the kind of constitutional framework we created. We created a framework for a very vibrant democracy. Some of these discussions are very healthy for our democracy. We are putting through every arm of government, every independent constitutional commission, through the scrutiny that they deserve. Because at the end of the day, we've got to be sure that as we respect these decisions, then they are also done in public interest and in the right way. So the ruling, as much as we disagreed with it, we respected it.
Right.
And to me, that is what is the most important thing, that we have entrenched constitutionalism and the rule of law. And Jubilee is at the front of that, that as disadvantaged as Jubilee feels, they have respected that ruling and are moving in line with it to conform to whatever other directions and orders were given, which include having a repeat election within the 60 days.
All right, let's leave that in terms of the petition. Of course, it's a story we shall continue to keep an eye on as post-petition analysis continues. And of course, we focus now on the next 31 days when Kenyans will be going back to the ballot for a repeat presidential election. Let's focus on that battle royale and start with where NASA are demanding for those reforms, saying no reforms, no election.
These are the conditions. We call them irreducible minimum conditions, which must be met before we go to elections, whether it is October 26th or any other day later. We therefore put them on notice. Put them on notice that if these conditions are not met, then there will be no elections. We are saying not that we are going to boycott elections. There will be no elections of the Republic of Kenya.
We will not go to an election until the IBC rectifies all the mistakes which have now been confirmed by the court. Until those individuals who are responsible for these criminal acts are brought to book, removed and prosecuted, then we are ready to go for elections within 60 days.
Is NASA and their demand. Jubilee on the other side have also spoken about the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, speaking about the technology, which has been a big issue in the election and of course in the presidential petition.
They are called us in his chambers and are given new orders or directions telling us that because of jurisdiction issues, we go back to the High Court for interpretation of Article 138 and 140 as to what it means if an election is declared null and void and you're ordered to do fresh elections, whether all the other candidates can participate. So we are going to file an election petition, a constitutional petition tomorrow in the High Court, seeking that interpretation.
Others may want to open the server, but I don't know anyone who voted in a server. You voted, put your vote in the ballot box. We want them to be recounted as we move to the 17th. We also are telling the IBC that they should not try to pander to the whims of any single political party.
Now, Germany, with all this sophistication in technology and ICT, the highest court has outlawed the use of electronic voting and electronic transmission of results. But they have discovered and they have articulated that electronic voting and electronic transmission can be subject to manipulation. Now, I think Kenyans also should recall what we said for several months, that there must be manual backup.
All right, now as we continue, of course, remember Kenyans are known to be the queens and kings of distance running, and breaking news right at the bottom end of your screen there. And